It all started with a nightmare. In the stillness of the night, when the world outside was silent and the only sound was the faint rustle of sheets, something sinister crept into Harry Potter's dreams. It all started with a nightmare. Harry's sleep was restless, his brow furrowed, sweat beading on his forehead as he twisted beneath the covers, trapped in a world he couldn't escape. It all started with a nightmare. The moonlight cast long shadows across his room, making the familiar seem strange and threatening. Even in sleep, Harry sensed something was wrong. Harry Potter was back at the Dursleys' house on Privet Drive. It was summer, hot and sticky, but a chill ran down his spine. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of secrets and unspoken fears. In his nightmare, he saw an old, crumbling house, its windows dark and foreboding. A snake slithered silently across the dusty floorboards, its scales glinting in the faint light. Frank Bryce, the lonely groundskeeper, crept through the halls, his heart pounding as he overheard voices. One weak and cold, the other unmistakably Wormtail's, trembling with fear. They plotted against Harry. He woke with his scar burning, a pain so sharp it made him gasp. It was a warning he hadn't felt in years, a sign that the darkness he'd fought before was stirring again. The Dursley house felt like a prison, its silence pressing in on him, heavy like the calm before a storm. Shadows seemed to hold secrets, and every creak of the floorboards made him jump. The nightmare replayed in his mind. The snake, the chilling voice, Voldemort's name whispered like a curse. Harry's heart raced, fear prickling at the edges of his thoughts. Harry knew something was wrong, something was coming for him. Then, as if fate had intervened, a letter arrived from the Weasleys, inviting him to the Quidditch World Cup. The sight of their familiar handwriting brought a flicker of hope, a reminder that he wasn't alone. It was a lifeline, a burst of sunlight in his dark summer. But even as hope blossomed, fear lingered. The burning scar was a constant reminder that danger was near, lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. Leaving the Dursleys wasn't an escape, but a step towards something darker. The Weasleys arrived in a whirlwind of chaos, bursting through the fireplace in a shower of soot and laughter, their presence filling the house with warmth and noise. For a moment, Harry forgot the nightmare and the pain in his scar. He was just a teenager again, surrounded by friends, excited for a sporting event that promised adventure and joy. Laughter echoed through the room, and for a brief time, the shadows seemed to recede. But as he packed his things, the memory of the voices from his dream crept back in. They were planning something terrible. The Quidditch World Cup was not just about a game. It was a gathering, a stage for something much bigger. It was about something much darker. Harry knew with chilling certainty that the real danger was just beginning. The excitement was tinged with fear, and every shadow seemed to whisper a warning. The world was changing, and Harry could feel the darkness closing in, ready to test him once again. The Quidditch World Cup was electric. Thousands of witches and wizards packed the stadium. Ireland versus Bulgaria, Victor Krum a superstar. Harry and the Weasleys had the best seats. For a few hours, everything was perfect. But peace never lasts. After the match, the celebration turned to chaos. Screams echoed, people ran in terror. Death Eaters marched, torturing muggles. The joy shattered, replaced by panic. Harry, Ron, and Hermione got separated, running into the woods. A voice shouted an incantation, Mors Mordre. The dark mark appeared, Voldemort's sign. Ministry officials arrived, suspecting Harry and his friends. The real culprits vanished, leaving fear and suspicion. The attack was a message, a declaration. The Death Eaters were bold, organized. Their master was stirring. The fun and games were over. A war was brewing, and Harry was in the middle. The darkness was closing in. The world was changing. Hogwarts was supposed to be safe. After the World Cup terror, Harry craved the castle's comfort, but this year was different. Dumbledore announced the Triwizard Tournament, a legendary competition between Hogwarts, Beauxbatons, and Durmstrang. One champion from each school would compete in dangerous tasks. The Goblet of Fire would choose the champions. Dumbledore drew an age line. No one under 17 could enter. The decision of the Goblet was final. Cedric Diggory, Victor Krum, and Fleur Delacour were chosen. But something was wrong with the magic. The Goblet's flames turned red again, spitting out a fourth name, Harry Potter. The hall went silent. Harry was too young, hadn't entered, but the Goblet had chosen. He was forced to join the champions. No one believed him. They thought he was a cheat. He was the fourth champion in a tournament meant for 3, a target. Someone had put his name in for a dark reason. The shadows were closing in. The danger was real. The tournament was a trap. Harry was caught in its web. The stakes were higher than ever. The darkness was closing in. The first task was a deadly secret, whispered only in the darkest corners of Hogwarts. No one outside the champions and a select few knew what awaited in the shadows. Harry was out of his league, surrounded by older, more experienced champions who had trained for years. He was the youngest, the outsider, and everyone knew it. The pressure was immense. He was alone, isolated by fear and uncertainty, with no one to confide in about the terrifying challenge ahead. Then, Hagrid revealed the secret: dragons. 4 champions, 4 dragons, each more fearsome than the last. The truth was almost too much to bear. They had to retrieve a golden egg from a nesting mother dragon, a task that seemed impossible, even for the bravest wizard. It was a death wish, a challenge designed to test not just skill, but courage and nerve. Mad-Eye Moody, the new defense against the dark arts teacher, gave Harry advice. He told him to play to his strengths, to use what made him unique. Harry's greatest strength was flying, his unmatched skill on a broomstick, his daring in the air. The plan was simple but risky: summon his firebolt and outfly a dragon, using speed and agility to survive. The day of the task arrived, the air thick with anticipation and fear, the stands filled with anxious faces, all waiting to see who would survive. The Hungarian Horntail, the most dangerous dragon of them all, awaited Harry. Its spiked tail and fiery breath made it a living nightmare. Harry's heart pounded as he faced the monster, every instinct screaming at him to run, but he stood his ground. He raised his wand, voice steady despite the fear, and shouted, "Accio Firebolt!" His broomstick shot into the arena, a streak of hope in the chaos. He leaped onto it, soaring high as the dragon unleashed a torrent of fire, the heat singeing the air around him. A spectacular aerial battle ensued, Harry weaving and dodging, the dragon relentless in its pursuit. Harry dodged again and again, the dragon's fiery breath barely missing him, its rage growing with every pass. Suddenly, it broke its chain, lunging after him with newfound fury, the crowd gasping in terror. With a final daring dive, Harry swooped back into the arena, snatching the golden egg from beneath the dragon's nose. He had survived the impossible. But this was just the beginning. Darker challenges loomed on the horizon. The tasks would only get harder. The danger was real, and it was growing. The darkness was closing in, threatening to swallow everything Harry held dear. The tournament was a trap, its dangers more sinister than anyone realized. Harry was caught in its web, every move watched, every mistake costly. The stakes were higher than ever, and the true test had only just begun. The golden egg was a mystery, its surface gleaming with secrets yet to be revealed. Harry stared at it, knowing it held the key to his next challenge, but unsure how to unlock its secrets. When opened, it shrieked, a piercing, unearthly sound that filled the room and left Harry reeling. The clue was hidden in the noise, but its meaning was impossible to grasp. The Yule Ball came and went, a brief moment of celebration and distraction. But the second task loomed ever closer, casting a shadow over every joyful moment. Cedric, in a rare moment of camaraderie, gave him a hint: take a bath with the egg. It was a cryptic suggestion, but it was all Harry had to go on. In the prefect's bathroom, surrounded by marble and flickering candlelight, Harry opened the egg underwater, hoping for answers. The shrieking stopped. In its place, a haunting riddle from the merpeople echoed through the water, clear and strange. He learned he had just 1 hour to retrieve something precious from the depths of the lake, or it would be lost forever. But how could he possibly breathe underwater for so long? The question haunted him, growing heavier with each passing day. Panic set in as he scoured the library for answers, flipping through ancient books late into the night, but finding nothing that could help. Then, on the eve of the task, Dobby appeared out of the darkness, clutching a handful of gillyweed, a magical plant that could change everything. Gillyweed would allow him to breathe underwater, sprouting gills and webbed hands. It was a last-minute miracle, a lifeline when all hope seemed lost. Harry ate the gillyweed, feeling his body transform as gills appeared on his neck, and his hands grew webbed, ready for the challenge ahead. He dove into the black lake, heart pounding, the cold water closing over his head as he entered the unknown. The underwater world was dark, silent, and filled with hidden dangers. Shadows moved in the murk, and every stroke took him deeper. He reached the merpeople's eerie village where Ron and others were bound, floating motionless, waiting to be rescued. Harry freed Ron and Fleur's sister, choosing to save more than just his own friend, even though it cost him precious time. He surfaced as the hour was up, exhausted and gasping for air. Last but not least, his courage tested to the limit. Dumbledore awarded him second place, praising his moral fiber and bravery in the face of danger. Harry had survived again, but the Triwizard Tournament was taking its toll. The danger was growing, and the shadows around him deepened. The darkness was closing in, more real and threatening than ever before. The tournament was a trap, its true purpose hidden beneath layers of deception. Harry was caught in its web, the threads of fate tightening around him as the next challenge awaited. The final task was a giant maze. The goal: reach the center and grab the Triwizard Cup, but the maze was filled with dangers. Harry and Cedric entered first, tied for first place. The maze was alive, paths shifting to confuse. Harry faced a boggart, a blast-ended Scroot. The maze preyed on his fears. He realized he was fighting the other champions too. Crumb attacked Cedric. Harry intervened. Someone was manipulating the task. The maze was a trap. Harry and Cedric decided to work together. They faced a giant spider, reached the center. The Triwizard Cup awaited. They agreed to take it together. A joint victory for Hogwarts. But the cup was a portkey. The maze was not the end. It was the beginning of the real trap. The danger was real. The darkness was closing in. The tournament was a trap. Harry was caught in its web. The stakes were higher than ever. The darkness was closing in. The world spun into a blur. They landed in a graveyard, not the maze entrance. The Triwizard Cup lay on the ground, sinister. Harry recognized the place from nightmares. This was Little Hangleton, Voldemort's father's grave. A cloaked figure emerged, Wormtail. He carried a grotesque, deformed baby. "Kill the spare," a voice commanded. Wormtail raised his wand. A flash of green light. Cedric Diggory fell, dead. The reality crashed down on Harry. This was an execution. He was next. Ropes bound him to a tombstone. Wormtail began a horrifying ritual. Bone from Voldemort's father, flesh from Wormtail, blood from Harry. The trap was sprung. There was no escape. The danger was real. The darkness was closing in. The tournament was a trap. Harry was caught in its web. The stakes were higher than ever. The cauldron bubbled, a shape forming. Lord Voldemort had returned. He was tall, thin, with a snake-like face. He had a body, no longer hiding in shadows. He signaled the Death Eaters. They apparated, kneeling before him. Voldemort scolded them, rewarded Wormtail. He told his story of survival and return. The Triwizard Tournament was a scheme to capture Harry. Voldemort wanted to prove his power. He ordered a duel with Harry. The Death Eaters formed a circle. There was no escape. "Crucio!" Voldemort screamed. Pain flooded Harry's body. This was not a fight for a trophy. This was a fight for his life. The danger was real. The darkness was closing in. The tournament was a trap. Harry was caught in its web. The stakes were higher than ever. The darkness was closing in. The war had begun. The duel was a nightmare. Harry dodged. Voldemort toyed with him. The Death Eaters laughed. Harry knew he couldn't win, but he had to fight. He faced his enemy. Expelliarmus, Avada Kedavra. A golden dome of light enclosed them. Priori Incantatem was happening. Echoes of Voldemort's victims emerged. Cedric, Frank Bryce, Bertha Jorkins, his parents. They encouraged him. His father told him to get to the Portkey. The connection broke. The echoes swarmed Voldemort. Harry sprinted, grabbed Cedric's body. Accio! The cup flew into his hand. He landed back at the maze, the crowd's cheers turning to screams. He had escaped, but brought a warning. The Dark Lord was back. The wizarding world would never be safe again. The war had begun. The danger was real. The darkness was closing in. The stakes were higher than ever.